What's going on, Johnny Nation? Welcome to episode 192 of the Eye of the Storm podcast. My name is David Barham, and today's episode is brought to you by the St. John's NIL store because that's the place where you can get your officially licensed Big East Championship gear today. That's right. Your St. John's Red Storm beat Seton Hall on Friday night and became back-to-back Big East Conference champions, as well as the number one seed in the Big East tournament. So what better way to celebrate than picking up the shirts that Rick Pitino, Zuby Ejiofor, Dylan Darling, and the entire team were wearing last night? Go to NIL store/St. John's and use the promo code StormPod20 for 20% off your entire order, thanks to this podcast and our collaborative effort with the NIL store. The regular season has come to an end. Friday night, the Red Storm traveled to the Prudential Center looking to do something they have never done, which is win back-to-back games in that arena. It's crazy to think about it, but before Rick Pitino came to Queens, the place called The Rock was a house of horrors for St. John's. Thankfully, just like about everything, once Rick Pitino got here, everything changed. And that was the case last night, as St. John's did indeed get the elusive back-to-back wins in the Prudential Center thanks to a 72-65 gutsy win. They became back-to-back Big East Conference champs. They became back-to-back number one seeds in the Big East tournament next week. And oh, by the way, St. John's is 36-4 in the Big East the last two seasons. It's crazy. It's insane. If you're watching on YouTube, I mean, there's another one of these going up in Carnesecca Arena. There's another one of these going up at the Garden. You're going to add another year to it. Justin Kramer is here with me. Justin, last year when St. John's won, it was almost a complete outer body experience. This year, I feel a little crazy saying this, but it's like we accomplished the goal. It wasn't unexpected. It was goal set out and we did it. You accomplished it. There wasn't this feeling of, all right, we didn't achieve it, especially after the craziness and the roller coaster at the start of the season. This year, it was less about surprise. It was more about that just planting your flag. And that's why it was so special. And perhaps not a crazy celebration, but more of this sense of accomplishment that not only is St. John's living up to the hype preseason, even though it started poorly, but they are making a statement behind Rick Pitino that St. John's is back. And when Rick Pitino in his opening press conference say that they're going to raise the roof up and that he's going to bring them back, he guarantees it. 2 years in a row to win the Big East Conference, that's really special.
In a word, culture. That's what Rick Pitino brought. And year one, they missed the tournament. The roster came together a little bit later than I guess everyone would have liked, with the hire of Rick Pitino coming, weeks after the season had ended. But that was the start of it. And last year was an outer body experience. When I think about last year, it will go down as maybe my favorite year ever as a St. John's fan. That being said, there is now a culture shift. The expectation is different. The expectation going into this season was winning a lot of basketball games and winning the Big East. Meeting those expectations are where we are now. We've met those expectations. And I mean, I hate to use the word relief, but in many respects, that's what it was. It was a relief that the season is now over, and now they can be laser focused on the Big East tournament and beyond.
Well, relief, I think, is right. And I think that's why my first thought is like, it's kind of crazy that we're here and we're talking about it, because when you dial it back to end of November, beginning of December, St. John's is 9-5, and everybody is talking down about St. John's. My God, they are a disappointment. They're the biggest underachievers in the country. I can't believe they were ranked number 5. How did you lose to Kentucky? How did you lose to Auburn? And we were here. We were very honest. How'd you lose to Providence? But the journey is what makes it sweeter, right? The journey is the payoff. Justin, I think back to, at the end of senior night, I was sticking around. I was talking to Dylan Darling's dad, as I mentioned. I'm talking to Zuby's family and Oziah's family. And towards the end, Zuby and I we met up, and Little behind the scenes here. Uh, Zuby actually gave his flowers from senior night to my wife, which was a beautiful gesture, and they couldn't take it home because they were traveling and all that. So appreciate that. But I had a moment with Zuby who thanked us for the tribute video that we put together for him, and obviously Zuby is a fan favorite. Zuby is a personal all-time favorite. So we really poured our hearts into that one here at the Eye in the Storm podcast as we have expanded into some video production this year. Look for a Big East tournament hype video that has started. We're working on that as well. But I had a moment talking to Zuby and he thanked us for the video. And I said, listen, there's a lot more work to be done. And he acknowledged it. But I asked him to look up and I told him to look up at the flags and the banners that hang at the Garden. I'm like, you're part of this legacy here forever. That number that hangs on that banner next to all the Rangers greats, all the Knicks greats, next to Luke Hornacek, next to Patrick Ewing, next to Billy Joel, next to like these iconic names in this building. Zuby Ejiofor has a direct impact on a number that hangs on that board. And on Tuesday night, I said, don't stop because you need to put another number on that banner. And now he has. And so has Rick Pitino, because next to 2025 on that Big East Conference banner that hangs high above Madison Square Garden, the number 2026 will hang next year. I say that, Justin, and I know I don't have to tell you, but for everybody else, man, like, we have been through it, man. We have been through the darkest of times. When I talked to Dylan Darling's father, James, we were just kind of going through briefly the history of St. John's and how much losing we've seen. And he literally was like, man, you guys really have been through it. And yeah, man, when I started rattling off like Chris Mullen year one stats to him, he was like, woof. So guys, man, don't take this for granted. This is so beautiful. This is so amazing to wake up this morning, Justin saying, pinch me. Was that a dream? No. To see Zuby Ejiofor holding that trophy again, to see the champion shirts come out from the NIL store, the championship shirts come out from Mezzanine NYC. Please go support our guy, Jeff. It's something that I will not ever take for granted. It's emotional. It's so appreciative. And yeah, there's so much work to be done, but man, we've seen so much losing that we're back-to-back Big East Conference champions. We're 18-2 in back-to-back years. It's unheard of in our world. We're not Villanova. We're not UConn. That's what they were used to. It's our time now.
As you sit here and kind of put this in perspective, my mind was going to places thinking back on the last 25 years. And what I'm going to say are not the highlights. And I don't want to throw people under the bus, but I'm talking about the issue with Jarvis and all the walk-ons having to play when the roster got guttered after Pittsburgh. And guys like Ricky Torres, whose jump shot are still going up, and I'm waiting for them to come down at Carnesecca Arena and things like that. And other players who, in my mind, I guess I had hyped up as bigger deals potentially than they were, or guys that just didn't pan out for one reason or another, guys that we expected to stay 4 years and left after a year, or the guys that didn't come, that for whatever reason, the Isaiah Briscoe that doesn't get to campus. All these things are going through my head right now. And at some point, maybe during the offseason, when things are a little bit slower, maybe we can go back and do an episode just thinking about like where we've come from to get to this point. I think that would be a lot of fun. You would hear names like Phil Waite and Thomas Jasalonis and just like the highs and lows that have come with the last 25 years. But I say this all now as a matter of perspective. Through the highs and the lows, and let's be honest, there's been a lot of lows. We are at the top of the mountain, and nobody can say that last year was an aberration because you've done it again.
It's funny you say Phil Waite, and God, if you're a Johnny fan listening to this and you remember Phil Waite, I was so excited when we got him. I was like, oh my God, we've got this 7-2 center. He's going to change everything for St. John's. Yeah, that didn't happen. All right. Justin, it was a stressful evening to say the least. But championship mentality and the clutch plays in the second half, led by who else? Zuby Ejiofor would power the Johnnies. This is the first time that the Johnnies win back to back regular season championships since 85, 86. They were pretty good back then. It's actually incredible. But this game, man, you knew going into it, it was going to be tough. In the first game that St. John's played against Seton Hall at the Garden, it took a 15-point second half comeback. Shaheen Holloway always has his guys ready. And so going into this game, it's not that I wasn't confident that they weren't going to win. He just knew that it was going to be difficult. That building, obviously, but Seton Hall had everything to play for. You knew they were coming into this game saying, listen, our season is on the line. And when you have a desperate team like that, when you have a team that knows that they have to bring it, they have to beat you in order for them to get to the NCAA tournament, barring them running through the Big East tournament, you have to expect a level of urgency. And I thought that the start of the game was imperative. I had a 4-part tweet that I sent out in the morning. It's obvious, right? Like, Dave, obviously they can't start flat. But too many times this season, we have seen them do that. And, on the road, it's even more imperative. There was over 9,000 fans at the Prudential Center, and they're playing for their life. Seton Hall scored the first 2 baskets of the game, but then St. John's responded in a really big way. And I thought that really set the tone. It was super important. Now, they would go through a lull after that, which is the unfortunate common denominator that we're seeing. But I thought the start of the game was really important, and it was good not to see St. John's start like 2-12.
Seton Hall, and I want to start with Seton Hall because I knew this was not going to be a walk in the park, and I'm surprised. And let me explain what I mean by that. Going into this season, I had Seton Hall as the worst team in the Big East.
Me too.
If you looked at this roster, you said to yourself, they'll be lucky to win 3 or 4 games in the Big East, even in a down year. I didn't see where the points were coming from, and I had no idea that Shaheen Holloway was going to get them to play this kind of defense because they are a very, very, very good defensive team. So at the outset, my apologies to Seton Hall and Shaheen Holloway. They outshot their coverage as they say. They finished 10-10 in the Big East. They won 20 games. And they're a tough out. They played a lot of good teams tight. They lost to, they lost games that, to superior opponents, but they're a good basketball team when I did not think they were going to be a very good team at all. So kudos to Shaheen Holloway. Kudos to the fan base. I hope they enjoyed the season. And now I'll put that in the rearview mirror for this conversation. You knew this was going to be a tough game, and you're right. You didn't want to give them the confidence early on that if they started the game up 14-6, that they would say, it's in sight. We can win this game and possibly get an at-large bid with some luck in the Big East tournament. Meanwhile, St. John's obviously had everything to play for as well. So it was an interesting battle in that sense. Both teams had to come out hot because you didn't want to give an inch in a game like this, especially because Seton Hall has that ability to make things ugly and muck it up and have you go through scoring droughts, which we'll get to that. That may be our Achilles heel when it's all said and done. But kudos to St. John's because after Seton Hall scored those early 2 buckets, I think that early run, which you pointed to, was what really set the tone the rest of the way.
Yeah, and it's good that you bring that up because, the conversation coming into this game was that, yeah, Seton Hall had everything to play for, but like so did St. John's. Like if St. John's drops this game, you don't get the Big East Conference title. You get the 2 seed potentially in the tournament. There was enough to play for. And again, like what we opened with, like that stamp of last year wasn't an aberration. Now, I don't think that finishing second in the Big East would make last year nullified essentially, but there was hype going into the season, top 5 preseason, all that stuff, all the money spent on the roster. You continue to validate yourself. Rick Pitino continues to obviously validate his career, but he continues to validate what is happening here at St. John's. Now, the start that I talked about, Dylan Darling hits a three, makes it 14-7. It was just important to get that. But, Zuby's got 7 of the first 16 points. And then there was this important moment, in my opinion, that I thought Seton Hall was kind of climbing back into the game. They got to within 2. Hopkins gets to the line and got a great pass. Mitchell to Zuby for an easy one. A Bud Clark turnover got St. John's ahead 21-16 with 7:54 to play. Seton Hall came into this game as a top 15 defense. We know that that's how they're going to win the game. The problem with Seton Hall has been all year is that they can't shoot. They can't hit the three. They're a top 6 worst three-point shooting team in the country. They didn't hit their first 3 until I believe it was the last minute of the entire game.
That's right.
So when you have that kind of a quote-unquote advantage, now St. John's hasn't been hitting the 3 really well too, but in this game they had some really timely threes, especially from Oziah Sellers. So that was an advantage. But, that first half, man, it was back and forth, back and forth. The issue, same as the first game, if you remember, Justin, Zuby Ejiofor foul trouble. Now, in the first game, St. John's had to overcome Zuby's foul trouble thanks to Dylan Mitchell and Dylan Darling. In this one, you kind of had everybody to look for, but it was one guy, in my opinion, that really stepped up. Ruben Prey. I thought perhaps the best all-around clutch moment, big spot, really need you performance from Ruben Prey in his 2 years as a Johnny. He hits a really important 3 towards the end of the first half that made it 27-24. Then right after that, he followed up with a 30-27 hook shot. So really, really important for Prey to finish the half really strong. And then at the end of the game, he was really vital as well. Him and Zuby combined for 14 points in the first half. The rest of the team had 16 in that first half. It is, and I know I'm going long here, but like Ruben Prey deserves a lot of praise. We're about to play some clips, but Ruben Prey is being looked at as, while I know Rick Pitino has said that he thinks that he could be a starter next year, but he's just going to be another vital piece next year, just like Dylan Darling will be, just like Lefty will be. And these guys that are coming in with years under their belt, especially Ruben, he's going to be a 3rd-year big man potentially next year. That experience, another camp with Rick Pitino. So we're seeing flashes, and I thought Ruben had one of his best games in a Johnny's uniform, if not his best, to help St. John's clinch back-to-back Big East titles.
I don't know what Ruben Prey's upside is over the long term, but I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, without Ruben Prey, St. John's loses this basketball game yesterday. When Zuby Ejiofor, who is not only should be the Big East Defensive Player of the Year, but when Zuby Ejiofor is on the floor, he has the uncanny ability to stay out of foul trouble most nights.
Except against Seton Hall. But I say that to say last night was the exception to the rule, and somebody needed to step up. And when they're playing 3 forwards for a lot of the game, that leaves one man, for all intents and purposes, on the bench that has to step up and fill that void. This was not a game where Ruben Prey played for 5 minutes and did stuff in that time. He played 17 minutes. He played a ton of minutes. He was efficient. He drilled a huge 3, and take a look at who's leading the team in 3-point percentage. We'll table that for now. 3 gigantic rebounds and a big block shot that was kind of putting his mark on the fact that this was his game. Now, Zuby was the player of the game, but without Ruben Prey, St. John's is not a Big East champion. I don't know if you've noticed it, but Ruben Prey last few blocks have been really violent, and he's almost like really killed people. He's been volleyball spiking some blocks, man. Here is Rick Pitino in his opening comments talking about the common denominator winning back-to-back titles. I think you can assume what that is. Really high praise for Dylan Mitchell and Dylan Darling. We're going to get to both of them. And the Big Bells Award going not to Zuby Ejiofor, but to the man that we just spoke about.
We have won back-to-back championships with 2 different teams, and that's not easy to do. There's been one common denominator, and that's the young man to my left. The Big Bells Award tonight was not given to Zuby, although his stats were great, and when needed to score, he scored, but it went to Ruben Prey. Because when Zuby was out resting, Ruben did a phenomenal job. Dylan Mitchell and this young man have to be exhausted. The amount of minutes they played was I was getting tired watching them. And he had to bring the ball up. He had to chase the point guard. It wasn't easy for him, but he gutted it out. Real proud for St. John's. Very proud for the players. It was a great win. And the Big East tournament's a lot of fun. But the regular season means the most because that's your body of work for the entire year. Now we want to win the Big East tournament, but it's 3 games in 3 days. And we'll get our rest tomorrow. We'll practice in the afternoon. No, kidding.
That could be a joke, right?
No, but we'll take a day off, get ready, and enjoy this night. The players are really fired up. They're very, very excited.
Justin, I think it's so important, like late in games like this, late in the season, to have guys step up. Ruben has had an up and down season. He's been playing behind 3 forwards who have been the anchors of this team. But there have been moments throughout the season where Ruben Prey has stepped up and has played and contributed big minutes, whether it's defense, offensively. The biggest important factor there is that it proves the depth of this team. I think that it's going to be very vital in the NCAA tournament. And you know that if, God forbid, a Zuby Ejiofor or a Dylan Mitchell get into foul trouble, that you can look down the bench and you don't really have a ton of drop-off. Now, obviously, the drop-off to Zuby is huge, but like defensively, you can call on Ruben. You can get him to hit a 3. That gives you a sense of comfort. Now, I actually want to get to what Zuby said here because, I could spend 10 hours talking about Zuby, but like Zuby walked off the court, got a Johnny contingency at the Prudential Center. They're all cheering for him. But Zuby made it a point to credit Ruben and say that Ruben and that play, that's what they're going to need the rest of the way.
I still get chills, each and every time, just stepping on the floor and going out there and performing at a high level, for my teammates, for the fans, and St. John's, they showed out tonight. And when the final buzzer, was called and I was able to step off the floor, I was met with some, ovations that I've pretty much had all year. So I appreciate you guys and like Coach said, back to back. It's not easy. It takes everybody being committed to one main goal and winning, and I think we did a really special thing tonight.
Zuby, what did you think of Ruben tonight?
Oh, he was absolutely, perfect, I would say. Had some questionable calls. Coach sat me on the bench, gave me a little bit rest, like he said. But Ruben stepped up, hit some big time, shots in the post, and he played well as well, defensively, and it's something that we're going to definitely need from him for the rest of the season. But like I said, he stepped up big tonight, as well as other people as well.
Look, Justin, I think that this is a team that's very together. I think that when you're anchored by Zuby Ejiofor, when he can acknowledge, obviously, how much other guys are vital to his success and the team's success. I mean, this kid is the most selfless kid you can think of. And I just think that it's super amazing to see in this NIL culture where these guys are getting paid a lot of money, obviously, to have the bigger picture in mind. And again, I'm biased. I don't care who knows it. This kid has been raised right. This kid has a great head on his shoulders. This is not a kid who is frivolously spending his NIL and all that kind of stuff. And he's not riding around in, a Lamborghini. This is a kid that gets it. And that's why NBA scouts are flooding. And he's going to be a pro. And he's going to be a big-time contributor at the next level. Now, there's a lot of work still to be done at St. John's. But there is character here that is exemplary. And that starts with parents, that starts with upbringing, and that starts with amazing ability to be coachable. And I can't commend Zuby Ejiofor enough about that.
One of the best things that the broadcast did last night was go inside Rick Pitino's huddle. But Rick Pitino wasn't talking, not in this particular clip. Zuby Ejiofor was coaching the team. Now, when you've got somebody on the sidelines and in the huddle named Rick Pitino, needless to say, you're listening to what he's saying, and there's a reason that he's probably the greatest college basketball coach that's ever lived. And if not, he's certainly in the conversation. But even Rick Pitino stopped talking and let Zuby Ejiofor have the floor to coach, be the player coach that he is. And that to me was one of the most fascinating 10 seconds of audio and video that I've ever seen. And I think it not only speaks to his character, but his IQ and his intensity and everything else, reminding these guys it starts and ends on the defensive side of the floor. I loved that clip.
Justin, it takes a lot of balls to cut off a Hall of Fame head coach, but even Rick Pitino said that he's never had a player that has been this vocal and this, passionate about making sure that the message gets through to his teams. And, Rick Pitino has said it. He's talked about stories before where, in the NBA, he would ask his players, hey, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? And the players look him up and down and go, what the F are you talking about? You're the coach. You tell us. But, Google that. You'll find that story. But in this moment, in this instance, Zuby Ejiofor took the reins and he knew, and I think he does know this, that sometimes that message has to be heard from your players, and that's why he is the captain. Let's hear it from Rick Pitino about Zuby's vocal leadership in the huddle.
When he was on the bench, every time out, he came in the huddle, and after I was done, he spoke to the team about what they have to do defensively. Every time out. Not one, not twice, every single time out. I've never had a player talk like that in timeouts. And to me, I respect that so much because it was all about defense. It was all about locking down certain things, and he's witnessing on the court. And obviously, everybody knows how hard he works. But, when you come in and you got to ice that game and you got to score, he did it. He did it. So he backs up everything he preaches, which is a phenomenal thing. And I think this young man is turning into one of the premier point guards in the Big East. And I'm proud of him. He's gone from a state I've never been to Madison Square Garden.
I liken it to the Baltimore Ravens in the Ray Lewis era. When Ray Lewis was on the field and in the huddle, in between plays, he was directing traffic. He was pushing up on the defensive lineman to go in the different gaps. He'd be looking back at Ed Reed behind him and moving him around. He was the quarterback of that defense. Zuby Ejiofor is the quarterback of this team on the basketball floor. And it's interesting because normally you get that out of the point guard position, but to have a 6'9" center basically directing traffic, I've never seen anything like it. And that's why the pros are salivating over this kid, because yes, he can now shoot the basketball and he can dribble the basketball, things that he probably couldn't do when he got to campus, right? But now he's doing it in all facets of the game, but it's up here. It's in between the ears. That's what separates Zuby Ejiofor from everybody else.
I think when you think about Zuby's growth and ascension, we talked about, I remember watching him play behind Joel Soriano. Zuby never could catch the ball. It was weird. He would fumble the ball all the time. But when he was on the court, you could see the motor, you could see how impactful he was. And there were statistics that per 40, Zuby was a more effective player than Joel Soriano when he was on the court. But you can't be turning the ball over. You can't be a liability getting the ball in the paint. He couldn't put it on the floor to do his spin moves and stuff. So he had a lot of work to do. Put a lot of work into it in the summer. Obviously, he's gotten so much better. But yeah, his vocal ability is something that's really taken a step up. And again, just the peek behind the curtain. Like I speak to Zuby's dad almost daily, and when we talk about Zuby, it's always just like, oh, how was practice? It was fine. Like trying to get information, and then you just think about it, it's like, man, these are 20-year-old kids, man, and like it's just. They're these behemoths of these basketball players, but like they're just kids still. And so like to get them to open up to parents, it's so funny. And then you see him on the basketball court, you see him in that huddle, and he's just like screaming and imperative, and he's so passionate. That's what separates the greats. And that having that on and off switch. And that's why his jersey deserves to hang from the ceiling at Carnesecca Arena. That's why his name needs to be emblazoned on the Hall of Fame wall. What he has meant to St. John's, like Justin, you said, the culture, what he has done, what we said last week, the revitalization, the rebirth, the face of bringing St. John's back from the ashes. That's what Zuby Ejiofor is, and that's why he deserves all the praise. He deserves every minute of conversation. He deserves every second. He deserves the Big East Player of the Year award. He deserves the Defensive Player of the Year award. We're going to hear about that on Wednesday. I hope to be there to cover it as well. So that's what Zuby really, really means. I want to play one more thing while we're on the topic of Zuby and his greatness. I thought Zuby had the quote of the night yesterday. Rick Pitino in his introductory press conference made his guarantees, thanked everybody for the opportunity. But Zuby Ejiofor last night said that St. John's is nationally relevant again because of who's in charge. And to me, that speaks to obviously Rick Pitino, the ship that he captains, and everybody that has bought in around him.
It's why I'm here, and I think obviously it's not just me, and you got to give a whole lot of credit to Coach Pitino and the staff of the pieces that they were able to bring to this program and the culture that we're trying to build here. St. John's is nationally known now, and he's gonna be as long as he's in charge, and we're trying to build something special, especially not just now, but even when I leave, down the line, and just a winning culture of great guys that are really committed to playing under Coach Pitino and what he stands for, because he's one of the best, if not the best, of all time. So yeah, it's been like I said, a special journey, and it's all a testament to who's in charge.
When Father Shanley brought Rick Pitino into St. John's, he did it with one purpose. Well, two purposes, but really one purpose. And that was to make St. John's basketball relevant again. And by doing that, obviously winning basketball games. So they go hand in hand. But it was that relevance factor, which, let's call it for what it is. St. John's had been irrelevant for 25 years. Yeah, they had some bright spots. They made the tournament a couple of times. They had some great recruiting classes under Lavin and some great moments with Shamori Pons and Chris Mullen coming back and all that. I get all that. But they were irrelevant. And if you asked the fan bases or the administrations at other schools, they would say the glory days were gone. And it was a fair criticism. But within 3 years, St. John's is undeniably back to the point of prominence across the country. Now, there's still work to do. They've obviously won the Big East twice. They won a game in the NCAA tournament last year. Unfortunately, I think that the expectations this year were higher, but given the roster and given everything else that went along with it. So I don't want to say that the job is over. I think that there's still many more mountains to climb. But Zuby Ejiofor, crediting Rick Pitino, is on point. But in many ways, Rick Pitino can thank Zuby Ejiofor for helping this program get back to prominence.
Second half, Johnnies start with a 3-point lead, 30-27. Again, important how they start. But Justin, if you notice that it started in a poor way, though, because Zuby picked up that third foul. And it's funny. Zuby has gotten a little bit more demonstrative about fouls, which again goes to his outgoing personality that's kind of come out on the basketball court. He started to be what the F when he gets foul calls. He can't believe it. He's throwing his hands up. But he picks up his third foul. St. John's responded with the man of the game last game. And this is something we have to talk about. Josan Sanin hits a three to make it 37-31. He hits another three to make it 40-33. Then Sanin hits a sweet bounce pass to Ruben Prey that leads to a foul. The consistency, as we talked about this with Ian after the Villanova game, you can't do it one game and not show up again. Now, Sanin didn't have a phenomenal game, but he made clutch shots. He
He
was
also had a
there.
huge rebound.
Yeah.
I don't know, only one rebound, but it was a big rebound in a key moment. And I remember when I saw him come down with it, I said that is not the Seton that we saw earlier on this year. Again, I'd like to see more activity out of the guards on the
Yeah.
glass, but that was a big one.
Yeah. And the consistency, and again, we talked about it, Joe Sandin was like, my shot's cold blooded. I'm not afraid to take the shot. But man, those threes are so important. Again, when you're in that close game, especially to start a half, when you have a team that's not giving you much, where points are at a premium, when you didn't hit the three, in the first half, Dylan Darling was the guy who hit a three, and Ruben Prey hit a three. That was it. Johnnies were 2 of 11 in the first half. And then in the second half, they made 5. That's what it's all about. And Joe Sansanin started that. And that was really, really important. But it goes to my bigger point. Consistency and being able to be there to make plays, not wilting when things aren't exactly going your way. That's been the story of Ian Jackson, because Ian Jackson was horrific in this game. When I tell you what Ian Jackson did in this game, you can't come back to me and say, okay, we need a longer leash for Ian. You can't do what he did in this game. Everything is on the line. Super important game. Ian Jackson played a few minutes. He played 2 minutes in this entire game.
3
Why?
minutes,
Three?
3 fouls.
3 minutes. 3 minutes, 3 fouls. He fouled a 3-point shooter, which he did the game before as well. He got another 2 fouls. You can't do that when you're on the court. You have to be more cognizant. And that's where the frustration lies with Ian. It's like, you want to give him a longer leash, fine. But you can't, in a pivotal game like this that you have to win, you can't just allow those kind of mistakes to happen. And that's how you end up glued to the bench.
And the problem is that now every game is a pivotal game. Every game is do or die in that sense. You go into the Big East tournament, you lose, you're out. You go into the NCAA tournament, you lose, you're out. And so it's not like you can say, well, give him a leash, let him play through it. If you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, you're sitting on the bench. And if you're not going to do it, you're going to Seton, you're going to Lefty, you're going to obviously Darling, who's now starting and getting big minutes. Jackson has effectively played himself out of the rotation, and I am not sure that he's going to get big minutes in the rest of the way, because Pitino still doesn't trust him. And although he had flashes of brilliance just a few games ago, he's been largely invisible since. Listen, he's got the talent. I think that at any given time he could spark this team, but the leash is about this big. And the second he screws up, he's going to find himself next to the guys on the bench.
I think that, yeah, he can spark them, and you need that spark. And we're going to keep saying that Ian Jackson's ability to take over a game and give you 8-9 points in such a small spurt is there. But it can't come at the expense of 2-3 turnovers and fouling 3-point shooters. I caught a lot of heat for my Ian Jackson take and saying that, yeah, listen, I want to see it again. I'm like, oh, you guys are so hard on him. Why are we coddling kids? Why do people think that, guys need to have their feelings, just, massaged in March? There's been a lot of time. The head coach has tried it privately to coach him up. He's done it publicly. He's tried to push the right buttons. Ian's shown flashes, like Justin said, but that consistency is nowhere to be found. And when you have a guy like Joe Sandin that has been able to step up, that makes a few threes, and then you have a guy who we have been very hard on too in Osiah Sellers, who hasn't been able to hit shots. And then last night in a game that's so pivotal in the second half, what does he do? He hits 3 after 3 after 3 and makes sure that St. John's wins the game. You have guys at the guard position that are not making as many mistakes. And while they may not be making shots all the time, they're not compounding that with other mistakes.
When you start playing good basketball teams in March, the games hinge on the little things. The extra pass, the turnover that can be avoided, that 5-second call, which literally could swing the momentum, things like that. And so while Ian Jackson has the ability to be that spark, that offensive firepower that St. John's needs, especially when they go through one of these lulls that we talk about, the flip side is one of those critical turnovers or one of those possessions where they foul a three-point shooter, allowing them to get 3 easy shots from the line. That is enough to just change the momentum completely. And you can lose games against good teams in March when you do that, because these games are so close. You're talking about teams that are well coached, teams that have a lot of talent. The difference between a Michigan and a Florida and a St. John's and a Kansas is negligible. These teams all have talent, but it comes down to executing on these key plays. And, I keep waiting for that turnaround, that consistency, and I'm still not convinced we don't see it. But it's time is running out, and it's at the point now where if Rick Pitino doesn't trust you, you're not going to play big minutes because he can't play you big minutes.
And that's why the conversation around Dylan Darling is so loud. Dylan Darling's impact on this team has been incredible. And it's hard not to talk about Mr. Church Bells in this glowing fashion when he was the backup. He was the guy that was coming in to supplement Ian Jackson. He has Wally pipped Ian Jackson. That's what's happened. And why? Because he put in the work with Rick Pitino early on when he was having his shooting struggles. He didn't allow that to, curtail his defensive effort. He's not letting his size deter. He's not letting the athleticism deter. He's playing with that pit bull mentality, that bulldog mentality, and he's winning games. And I don't know if that goes back to just, Ian Jackson being this highly touted 5-star kid who was an AAU all-star and the pride of Cardinal Hayes and just had an up and down year at UNC, but it hasn't clicked for Ian. And when you see Dylan Darling do what he's doing, and it's such a polar opposite to what Ian Jackson's doing, it just makes the conversation louder. Now, you need both of those guys to win. Again, I'm just being honest. We need Ian Jackson. Ian Jackson is one of the best guards that can put the ball on the floor, get to the rim, knife in. He's so fast. His three-point shot can be deadly. He needs to be on the court. He's just got to be focused. And, that's what we're just begging for. Nobody wants to be talking crap about Ian Jackson. Nobody wants this to be the conversation. You think I don't want Ian Jackson to be scoring 18 points a night every night? It's going to make it so much easier. You think we want Zuby Ejiofor to be scoring 21 points a night because he has to? The guards have to step up. They got to help. And then Isaiah Sellers did that yesterday. But so did Dylan Darling. Dylan Darling, man, yesterday, just so incredible. I want to play what Rick Pitino said, because he talked about the end of the game. And he said what was being told to the guys. And in a game like that against Seton Hall, when it's so close, when it's such a rock fight, you got to play not to lose. And even though Zuby Ejiofor had to take over, it was Dylan Darling that is showing shades of Zuby Ejiofor for this year as well as next year.
Well, the one message going into the final minutes of play was, guys, don't play to run out the clock. Attack the basket. So many times you try to, against a team like Seton Hall, you try to just move the ball, use the clock, and you get a bad shot. We made a mistake on their fire action of not switching. But, this young man played 30-something minutes. Dylan Mitchell played 37 minutes. He played 36-20. They were tired. Mentally and physically, it was a big fight. We didn't turn the ball over much. We took good shots. We looked for each other. So it was a great night for us. Another hostile crowd that we had to battle and win. And it takes good players to do that. And these guys are certainly terrific.
Rick, with Zuby, he sat for a while. The last 6:25, he scored 8 of his 21. That's hard, right? I mean, for a player.
Well, he's sitting, but he just took it over. He said, "I got to score," and he had. We've said this 100 times this year in huddles. No fear of failure, no fear. Go. And he epitomized that tonight. He just got the ball. He just went, scored, played with great confidence, the confidence of a two-guard, putting the ball on the floor, making those plays. But he's had a great run, great 2 years, just so beloved by the fans. And this young man's going to develop into a beloved point guard for the fans. He's if he rubs off against Zuby enough, maybe he'll be the captain next year.
Justin, I don't know about you, but a St. John's 9-point lead was, I think it was 44-35. And then it got shrunk to 2 after a 7-0 Seton Hall lead. Did you get a little bit of nervous? There was some sloppy plays, some poor possessions. It was 44-22, 13-37 to go. And then the guy stepped up, man. It was Dylan Darling. 2 super tough through contact layups. And it was Darling, man. I can't say enough about how important he has been and his toughness. And, in a game where you go up against another smaller guard and Bud Clark, and Dylan Darling owned him in that first game too, especially late. To see him kind of do it again and get those clutch baskets, it's been awesome to see.
Dylan Darling has been a revelation since January, I guess maybe the middle of January. What he's done the last 6 or so weeks is nothing short of remarkable, because it was like such a turnaround from what we were seeing earlier in the year, where he couldn't hit a three, he couldn't defend on the perimeter. And now he's almost like he reminds me of Io in a sense. When he's in the game, I'm calm. I know he's not going to make a bad play. Listen, he had 2 terrible turnovers yesterday with cross-court passes, but that is an anomaly. I don't think that it's the kind of thing you get from him all the time. And what's interesting is, this team goes through droughts, and these droughts, again, if there's an Achilles heel for the team, it's these scoring droughts, and you scratch your head because you look around and you see all this offensive firepower, and then they don't score the ball for 3.5 or 4 minutes. I always thought that Ian Jackson was going to be the guy, and I still think he can be, but I always thought that Jackson was going to be the guy who, when this team needed a bucket, he'd be like, all right, guys, just give me the ball. I'm going to hit a three, or I'm going to go to the basket and get fouled, and I'm going to kind of stop the drought. And I still think that they need that from him, and I think that he can be that. But yesterday, the guy that stopped the drought, Dylan Darling.
Yeah, man, it's great to have security blanket, and I think that's kind of what he is, man. He's been the guy to calm the waters. And Zuby Ejiofor sat for an extended period of time in the second half. He finally comes back in. It was 50-49. There was a Darling turnover that led to the layup, and it was right before Ruben Prey got that big block we talked about earlier, and Zuby comes back in. What does he do? Back-to-back buckets, goes up to 17 points, and then it's Isaiah Sellers' time. He hits the 3. St. John's goes up 62-51, and you kind of started to feel like, all right, 12-2 run, 7-0 run. And St. John's defense kind of stepped up. I want to talk about a little bit. St. John's defense in this game was really good too. You hold the Seton Hall team to the amount of points that they had. Obviously, in this first half, you hold them to 27, and then St. John's held them on kind of a few droughts of their own. Seton Hall went for 1 of 7, twice over the span of 4-minute stretches. Darling made some clutch free throws late to give him a 10-point lead. Ejiofor sent a 3 by Seton Hall into their own bench, which was a huge moment. And then Seton Hall got just chipped away, 66-63. They're getting close, but Zuby at the end of the day was nails, hits 2 free throws, and it was pretty much it. Play the call. St. John's back-to-back champs. Probably going to hear that in the intro next year. It's really, really imperative. Justin, I'm just curious about your take on Isaiah Sellers. 11 points, 3 triples, 5 rebounds, 1 steal in 32 minutes. Isaiah has been a little bit up and down, but he's starting to hit the threes, 2 the last game, 3 yesterday in the second half. Super, super vital moments to hit those threes. Again, more of those corner threes. I thought one of the things that I wanted to see in this game overall was St. John's taking more threes. They took over 20 last game. They took 20 this game, shot 7 of 20 in this one, 35%. better. I think that's where you want to be, hopefully a little bit higher, but like, man, you'll certainly take that, given the way that they have played. But Oziah Sellers was, I thought, huge in this game, especially in the second half. Really happy to see him starting to see the ball go through the basket. 11 points all in the game, most of them coming in the second half here, and 3 of 5 from deep. He made 2 free throws, so great to see.
Not only that, he had 5 rebounds and no turnovers in those 32 minutes. Rick Pitino trusts Oziah Sellers, and Oziah Sellers, even if you don't see it on the stat sheet, he's been doing a much better job of keeping his man in front of him and playing just a heady game, a smart brand of basketball. And if you can play 32 minutes, shoot threes at an efficient clip, play defense and not turn it over, Rick Pitino is going to keep you on the basketball court. And he deserves to be there. He trusts Sellers to be in the right place at the right time. And when the shots are falling, he's a vital piece to the success of this team. And we said it last episode, right? We don't need every guard to step up. I know, again, I think it's impossible for everyone to be shooting, 45% from 3. But if 2 of the guards step up, and in this game, it was Seton for a stretch, but it was Sellers and Darling for the brunt of the game. That's why they won the basketball game. And of course, with Ruben Prey and not to diminish Zuby's efforts, but you need 2 of the guards to step up on any given night. Maybe Seton, maybe Sellers, maybe Darling, maybe Jackson, but you need 2 of them to step up. And that is why they're the Big East champs again, because they have enough depth that on any given night, different guys can step up. And that's why they're dangerous. The difficulty for Rick, and I want to throw it back to you, a lot of people killed Rick in the Arkansas game last year for kind of pulling the plug on RJ Lewis. And I know it's revisionist history, but you're seeing a little bit of a trend in that there are these lulls. How do you think Rick Pitino is going to deal with this in the Big East tournament and beyond? When there is a lull, is he going to pull Bryce Hopkins if he's having an off night? Is he going to pull an Oziah Sellers, God forbid he's having an off night, to go to the bench? Do you think he learned from that last year, or what do you think happens going forward? God forbid they're in one of these pickles.
I think that the difference this year is that you have more guys that you could turn to that can get an easy basket in the paint. So like you mentioned Bryce Hopkins, like Hopkins is actually the guy that you could throw it into that can go and get you a bucket in the paint and get fouled. So I think that that's where the safety of it is. You would think that that's where an Ian Jackson could really step up, and maybe a Joe Sansana, because they can take you off the dribble and they can go through contact and get you an easy bucket. That's the hope. Now, the one thing that I'll throw it back to you about is that should they be in that kind of a moment, one thing that I'm really concerned about right now is St. John's free throw shooting. Yesterday, this game wouldn't have been close if St. John's made their free throws. I don't know what's going on at the charity stripe, but they missed 4 in the first half and they missed 5 in the second half. You can't be leaving that many points on the charity stripe. 13 for 22 is 59%. It's disgusting. Can't do that. These guys got to be better at the line, especially in March. That's what wins you games. That has to be corrected. That has to be something that really changes. They've been a pretty decent free throw shooting team, but like lately, there's been a handful of games where they've really struggled, and it's a little concerning.
Yeah, I mean, listen, a lot of these games in March come down to the charity stripe, right? It's a 2-point game. There's a minute and a half left. It's, extend the game if you're behind, and it's hit your free throws and lock it up if you win. That's March basketball for the most part. It's a little concerning. I'm not, I'm always of the opinion that even if you leave points behind at the charity stripe, if you do enough on defense and you hit enough shots, it won't matter. So do the other things and you can kind of overcome it. But yeah, it's something to keep an eye on as we get into March.
Justin, I would be remiss not to mention Dylan Mitchell. I know we haven't really talked about him, but 6 points, 7 assists, 7 rebounds.
Oh, he was great.
1 steal, 1 block, 37 minutes. He was everywhere. He made some passes that were just incredible. And
his vision is the best I've ever seen from a 6'8"
He's
St. John's big man.
So good. I was kind of screaming all game. Like in the beginning, I was like, man, Dylan was impacted the first Seton Hall game so much. He was getting into the paint really well. They couldn't stop him. And so I wanted him to drive a little bit more, but he really didn't force the issue offensively. And instead he was a facilitator, got some clutch rebounds. Just a really, really important glue guy. And, I don't think he's going to get you 15, 18 points much, but man, he has done everything and was super vital to this win.
It's been so great watching his maturation as a basketball player, leading the team in not only rebounds, but assists as well, leading the team in minutes, 37 minutes. He was everywhere that they needed him to be. You don't need Dylan Mitchell to score 20 points on this team because they've got enough guys that can score the basketball when they're playing well. They need guys who can do every other thing right. He reminds me a lot of Aaron Scott last year when they needed a steal or they needed a big rebound or they needed a block. Aaron Scott would step up on defense, and that's what Mitchell's been able to do. He has been every bit as good as advertised. I'm so glad that he's on this team, and I'm going to miss him when he's gone because he's got skills that you can't teach that kind of vision.
Bryce Hopkins had a decent game, made a handful of, tough plays, but 11 points, 4 of 9 from the floor. He missed 3 free throws, but he got 7 rebounds, got an assist, got a block, 2 steals, played 33 minutes, just made some clutch shots and a few key layups late. So important to see that from Hop as well.
It's a St. John's sequel. For the first time in 40 years, the St. John's Red Storm have won back-to-back Big East regular season titles. They clinched the 1 seed of the Big East tournament next week off another outstanding performance from Zuby Ejiofor.
Justin, your St. John's Red Storm are back-to-back Big East Conference champions. They have done it. Something that they have not done since 1985, 1986. They beat Seton Hall 72-65. And another banner will raise thanks to Rick Pitino, Zuby Ejiofor, and the St. John's Red Storm. But the job's not finished. There is a lot of work left to be done. And that starts on Thursday afternoon for the St. John's Red Storm. They will be the number 1 seed in the Big East tournament for the 2nd straight year. We do not know yet, as of this recording on Saturday morning, who they will play. But they will play at 12 o'clock. The Garden will be juiced. Oh, the Big East tournament. It doesn't get better than that. I can't wait. And the Johnnies have something special to play for. You got the conference. You heard Rick Pitino say it. The conference is what matters, right? It's a body of work. But the Big East tournament's special. The Big East tournament, yeah, you got to get hot. 3 games, possibly 4 games. But for St. John's, it'll be 3 games. You need your best basketball. Got to be clutch, not a lot of time to turn around and scout. Need to get your rest, got to stay healthy. And Justin, it could line up part 3. If everybody, that's what everybody's saying, it could be part 3.
Don't even say it. I just want to dream of it. Don't even say it. I know what you're going to say. Saturday night, I've got it circled on my calendar. Yeah, you're talking about the rubber match.
Rubber match of all rubber matches.
1 game at a time. Win on noon on Thursday, and I think they will. And then you look to what should be a Friday night matchup. And let me say something.
I know where you're going.
For years, I went to the Big East tournament, and I would go on Wednesday, and I would watch St. John's play. And then I would see them play Marquette on Thursday and lose by 40, right? I saw it time and time again, and I longed for that Friday night. And then 2 years ago, we finally got to Friday night, the bright lights, and one of the best basketball games I've ever seen with St. John's losing to UConn 95-90, if memory serves.
Yep.
And I said to myself, as UConn was en route to a national championship, and I'll say it until the cows come home, St. John's was the toughest opponent that UConn had in March that year before they won the title. And last year was magical. And so last year they get over the hump. They get to Saturday. They put a thumping on Creighton. They win it's the best time of year. It is the best time of year if you're a college sports fan. If you're any sports fan, this is the time of year. There is something magical about Madison Square Garden in the Big East tournament, even in a down year, quote unquote, a down Big East year. It is the best time to be a sports fan. I will be there this week. I know you'll be there this week. Any predictions?
Johnnies, back-to-back Big East tournament champs. Why not? Why not? All things coming up, Johnnies. Listen, whatever happens this week, I think the St. John's Red Storm have worked through some of their issues. I think that everything lines up potentially for that UConn 3rd game. I think if that does happen, and we'll see what we do with the pod, actually. We might do some preview stuff. I don't know. It depends on time. But St. John's would go into that game not thinking about them beating UConn on February 6th, but thinking about getting absolutely embarrassed on February 25th in Hartford. And Rick Pitino will take that personally. So we'll see. Lots of work to do to get there. What's your prediction, Justin?
St. John's is not losing on Thursday. St. John's will win on Friday. And St. John's and UConn are going to have a heavyweight fight 1 week from tonight as we record this podcast. The entire college basketball world is going to be saying, can St. John's beat the Goliath again, the giant UConn who smoked them in Hartford just a few weeks ago? I can't wait to see it. It's going to be the hottest ticket in town. Go on StubHub. It's going to be, the cheap seats are going to be $1,000 to sit in the Chase Bridge, all that stuff. It's going to happen. And I think that St. John's is not going to lose another game to UConn this year, just because I cannot see Zuby Ejiofor leaving Madison Square Garden for the last time as a loser. And that's why my money is on St. John's. But listen, it's a long road to get there. I don't want to put the cart before the horse. Let's see what happens on Wednesday. Let's see who we play on Thursday. And let's take it one game at a time.
One more important note of yesterday's win against Seton Hall. St. John's got their third quad one win, which is important as well. Lots of games for St. John's are teetering on that quad one, quad two number. St. John's in the quad two wins are 10-0. There's 2 or 3 that are just teetering. There's a lot of important games tonight in the Big East, where as the season wraps up for everybody else in the conference. So just monitor that. That being said, I know people have questions about the tournament and just in general. It looks like St. John's right now is about a 5 seed, maybe a 6. I thought yesterday's quad one win was important. Probably puts them into that 5 seed territory again. We'll see what happens here in the Big East tournament. Could bump them. Now, if St. John's does run the table and they do beat UConn for a second time, that could push the Johnnies into that 4 seed territory, which would be beneficial for geographic purposes, because that would put St. John's as a 4 seed and potentially in Philadelphia. We'll see. Lots of time to go before that, but there are some of the scenarios that you have to look for. Listen, Red Storm fans, we have been through it. That's the theme. We have been through it. There is nobody on planet Earth who watches college basketball that deserves this more than you. Everybody that has listened to this podcast, episode in, episode out, from number 1 to number 192, I thank you. This journey is for us. We do this for us. We do this from our hearts, from our souls, for the love of the Johnnies. Thank you, Rick Pitino. Thank you to everyone that has made this possible, because these are memories that we will cherish and hold on to for the rest of our lives. We have suffered a lot, and so that's why it makes it all so special. The payoff of being a fan, the payoff of being a diehard, spending your money on tickets, spending your time traveling, going to different states and countries. This is the payoff. That's why it's vital. Please also support Storm Marketing. It is what makes this possible. You heard me say it on the Jumbotron if you've seen me at Madison Square Garden. Every dollar counts. Storm Marketing, NY. Make it happen if you can. Donate a few dollars if you can. Please do a monthly subscription. That's how we put this roster together. That's how we continue to make amazing memories happen. And let's keep going, because there's a lot more work to do. There's a lot more wins to make. Big East tournament, Thursday. St. John's, the 1 seed. St. John's, your back-to-back Big East Conference champions. That feels good to stay. He is Justin Kramer. I'm David Baroff. Thank you for listening, Johnny Nation. I will see you at Madison Square Garden on Thursday. I will see you the entire rest of the way. Johnny Nation, thank you for listening. We'll catch you next time.